And get started with our December 2nd Early Childhood Education Committee meeting. Thank you all for being here. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from November 18th?
Yes.
So can I get a motion to approve? Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Horton. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Fantastic. I think we are fine on quorum. I see our 3 members online. If you don't mind, drop something in the chat to unmute you, just so we can make sure we hear you perfectly fine. But since today's going to be very much discussion based, thought we'd make a point to be inclusive. Last meeting was really fascinating, and a lot of things have taken place since then. I think everyone's had a chance to kind of marinate on the many possibilities that exist in the space of figuring out what our focused investment approach looks like. So rather than jump right into a whole new set of programming, I wanted to kind of start with discussing what the revised project plan could be for focused investment, or if anyone had any outstanding questions from that. We kind of went up to the wire, maybe ran a little bit over off the record, of what we had allotted for time here. So I want to make sure we start from that place, and everything else we can kind of shift. But yeah, on the screen there, our focused investment plan, kind of the outline for the folks who were not here last meeting. And again, the goal, the highest and best use of the money. So all the objectives are up there. We had a chance to kind of dive into what this could look like, but I thought I'd just see if anyone's had a chance to let some ideas evolve, or if there's anything you want us to take back or bring back that might require more information or research before we really dial in and commit to some form of path forward. And I have some thoughts here come on, but I prefer other folks just to weigh in. How do people feel about how the last meeting went as far as brainstorming?
Well, a lot of different views to account.
And I think that's going to be the challenge, right? Now that we have, I'll just make up an arbitrary number, but 9 different ideas where we could focus this investment. What additional information do we need to select the 1 or 2 that are going to be the most helpful for us? I'm saying being limited in 1 or 2, but how are we going to dial that down, par that down enough that we can do something meaningful? Because otherwise we're just limiting in a really kind of unproductive way where we could be focusing the money, and that's kind of the opposite of our net goal here.
Question that comes up for me, Martin, is it for the committee entirely a kind of a blank slate at this point in terms of our ideas as to what we're going to land on, 6-12 months from now? Or do we have, is there a kind of an emerging sense that you or others have that might be worth kind of exploring even now, because some clearer sense of that now might help direct activities and discussion in the interim?
I love that question. And I think Rachel can probably put it more eloquently than I, but we've had some things that have kind of been resounding points that are echoed in one form or another. I know there's been some interest in the past from folks about what it may look like from the infant side, or what it may look like from the pre-K side, and just figuring out what the most recurring themes are. Rachel, do you have the notes from the previous meeting or anything you can share with us?
I appreciate your question very much, Dr. Sandler, because as staff, we've been listening along and want to make sure we're supporting and not leading, but also helping the conversation take a good framework. We have a healthy process. We had originally had hearing from other North Carolina counties slated for today's agenda, and we decided that we approved the plan 2 weeks ago because we had a special meeting, and so it wasn't feasible to get that scheduled for today. So we've got our guests coming in January 5th, or for a January meeting. I had wondered if ideas or They had also recommended to expand into a subsidized slot for middle income families. They had recommended potentially doing a subsidized slot for middle income 3-year-old families as well, bringing it down to that age group. And they had recommended a behavioral, and it was coming out of this conversation as well, some kind of behavioral health support program that would help across the whole system. Workforce also came out, but I wasn't exactly sure how to put words around that one. Someone contacted me individually around an infant toddler idea, but I didn't know if that had enough momentum to put on the ideas list. But process wise, that's what I envision, is getting all the ideas on the table and then narrowing it down. So do we know what the ideas are? No. Is it a blank slate? Not exactly. It depends.
Well, just to clarify, who is going to be coming in? We're going to have somebody coming in January.
Wake County, Mecklenburg County, Forsyth County, and then Durham. 4 counties that have, like Buncombe, some kind of locally based early care, early childhood investment.
Most of them are doing spot zones.
And why did you feel that the idea about doing something to support the infant toddler age group, to support, for example, family-based home care, that didn't make the
I didn't want to be presumptuous. Would you like to see those 2 added?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, a program to support infant toddler slots.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then this other one was support for home-based, wait, what are those called? FC, family childcare.
Yes. Just as that seems to be a sector that has really been in decline recent years.
Consider them added. Do we want to open for other ideas to put them on, or you want to go back to your reflections and other thoughts of people's minds?
Let's go ahead and I'll be presumptuous and just put a 15-minute timer on new ideas, just so we have some guardrails. I would love to brainstorm with y'all forever, but refuse to play into that government stereotype.
Online, Stacy says, what about the centers we are currently funding that would have to close classrooms if our funding ceases?
I think that's a consideration for any discussion that we have among our options as a potential con or collateral consequence of the choice unit. Good flag, Stacey. Thank you.
I believe the workforce one was related to pay supplements that were expiring at the state level. So I don't know how detailed everyone that, but it's tagged for workforce.
There are some other examples in other locations of counties or cities supplementing the CCDF subsidy rate for providers to further encourage subsidy take up providers to get that payment closer to the cost of care. I'm not sure how feasible that would be in our case, but it could be something to look into.
And that has come up here before.
Yeah.
What about workforce from the training and development side, we currently fund a high school-based career and technical education part of the pipeline, a workforce program operated by Bunker Partnership that does like a cohort model, some work at AB Tech to support people moving through credentialing and degrees there.
I don't think it does much good to create slots unless we're gonna provide the educators to be the classroom teachers. So it seems like we need to have something where we're continuing to support, encourage, and strengthen teacher development. Because that's the whole key to everything.
I see you have an echo of absolutely from Stacy online to that same point. I'll add to that maybe a note as a question for our next meeting when we have our partners from other counties here. What does that look like for them? Because we have very limited control of what AB Tech or our partners may do. And I want some specific commitment from them about what they're willing to put into the program if we're going to invest our money there, because we have done that before. I want to see the highest and best use of our money, and I'm willing to explore all things, but also want to get results for whatever we do as well. So if they're willing to come to the table and say exactly what level of commitment to workforce development they're willing to do, I'm happy to entertain that. But also, I like having people sign the dotted line before we invest too much.
Since the attorney. I think it's a good point, and I want to lift up what our analyst said, which is that all of these levers pull on each other, right? And so, yes, if we increase spots, there will be a greater demand for teachers. Hopefully that impacts the cost of care, but I want to caution us from trying to fund the entire ecosystem, right? That I think Martin's point about partners is really salient, that this fund is one piece of the whole early education ecosystem across our community. It's a crucial piece, it's a really important piece, and we need other folks at the table because it won't solve all the problems on its own. And so just being really clear on our role in which lever we really want to invest in and bringing those other partners to the table to sort of pull the other ones and fill in.
Stacy has her hand raised.
I know, I'm so polite today. A couple of things. One, I don't know that our biggest concern right this moment, as opposed to when we started this commission, is open slots. Apparently, all the centers that I went to, they've got slots open. There are places open. Now, how do we get them filled? I agree with the woman who spoke earlier. I'm sorry, I can't see who's talking. About it does us no good to have slots if we've got no teachers, because we can't put a child in that classroom by themselves. So,
I agree.
We cannot do that. We've got to get our teacher pipeline strong enough. And over the last, how many years now have we had the commission? AB Tech isn't stepping up. When we hear where these other centers are recruiting from, they're not recruiting from AB Tech. They're recruiting from Blue Ridge and Stanley and Southwest. Is
But
it not? Is it?
I mean, do we have the enough want in this area to be able? I'm just saying from the workforce. Do we have enough people wanting to go into childcare? I mean, it doesn't seem like our programs that we funded that we saw this year, I was not super impressed.
Well, I'll tell you, it's a who comes first, the chicken or the egg. If you talk to AB Tech says no, but also AB Tech is not promoting the opportunities in early childhood profession as a profession, because they say we weren't paying enough. Well, we've got our pay scale up now, and we should be able to push that harder. But I don't know if AB Tech is our best advocate.
And some of what you're sharing doesn't match what they reported out, so maybe we peel the provider specific piece out and try not to talk about Buncombe County Schools or AB Tech specifically and think about the what for the purpose of today. And I'd be glad to follow up with Stacy or anyone who wants to talk about a specific.
Well, hearing that come out and thinking through how many moving parts there are and the robust discussion that we're having right now, maybe today's goal can be narrowing that list down to 2 or 3 priorities, and then we can really kind of dive
Right,
into
I
the
get
how. Because that's what this kind of feels like more than brainstorming which one we're going to choose, like what would this look like? But let's limit it enough so we can say, here are our top 2, 3, 4 options, and like 2 or 3 quick bullet points under each of how we accomplish that, and then we can know how to proceed best from there, because
The great news is that per our project plan, we don't have to narrow yet. We can still be an idea collection.
and I think that makes sense. Let's stay in that space, because as we're navigating and thinking through who we need at the table and how they're showing up, it is going to get more dicey and less brainstorming based and more execution opportunities for failure more than discussion of what we should be doing. How's that for attorney being positive? Stacy, to your point, I'll add one idea that could be an opportunity is if workforce is something that we're all equally interested in, and Pat, I think you named that first. Let's keep that as an option and then add as like a kind of a sub point, 1A to it. Who all's at the table and how do we make that happen? If it's something that we want to see happen, I don't want to say no off the bat. Let's be expansive and robust about who's doing what. And I think it makes sense to keep it as a priority and let someone tell us no or be our capacity or whatever before we discount ourselves on that. So it makes sense to, I would say that's an important one to me. Workforce is always going to be important. It's been important from the day that I joined the committee till now.
And as someone who taught teachers for many years at Warren Wilson and other places, I know there is a passion for caring for children. And how do we, either through our work or supporting our partners, get the word out there, we're ready to help you go into this field.
A campaign to promote the profession.
Pardon me?
Exactly.
A campaign to promote the profession.
Yeah,
Right, that it is a profession. It is not babysitting,
no,
but a profession, and requires a skill set that not everybody has. Lord knows I don't. And you know, and up the ante on it as far as, giving it some sizzle.
Some Riz.
float you on that. Give it some sizzle.
It's the first public meeting I've been a part of. I've heard sizzle and Riz.
I was about to say, oh yeah, it's exciting.
Well, no, this is great. How are y'all feeling about these as kind of our brainstorming takeaways? This is way more tangible than I expected us to be at this point in December, if I'm being honest. We had a really aggressive timeline for how quickly we were going to restructure or reframe this, and this feels like a good problem to have, but honest feedback.
Martin, if I could, this is Heather. It's hard to interrupt you all because we can't see, but I really want to reiterate that piece about the levers pulling on each other and the ecosystem, because I really think about 2 huge pieces are in supporting the workforce is the behavioral supports in classrooms, because children's mental health and behaviors are a part of what contributes to burnout, in addition to those low salaries or lack of training and support in classrooms. So I really think that that piece, the behavioral health, in addition to supporting teachers with their own mental health and increased salaries and training, is a really big piece. And I just keep coming back to those levers in that ecosystem. So just throwing in my brainstorm.
Agree. Yes.
Thank you, Heather. And while we have the folks online, for Emily, did you want to weigh in? Because I know it is harder to participate online.
No, I mean, I'm in complete agreement with what Joe kind of kickstarted here with every lever pulling on each other. But I'm also, Martin, you know, your point about making sure that our partners, and I heard you, Rachel, about, you know, trying to stay more general here, but making sure our training partners are just as invested and can give us a future forecasts. You know, as we were talking, I just looked on their website to see, you know, what kind of marketing materials exist for Blazing Trails, which is our workforce development component for this. And so, yeah, I would think that we need that type of insight from our biggest training provider here to ensure that workforce lever is being pulled in partnership with them in a strategic way.
Thank you.
I am capturing some notes about the how, even though I'm not standing up and putting it on the sort of the ideas list. Thank you for that.
So Martin, I'd like to just, I appreciate Heather's comment about the role of behavioral health problems as a driver of the difficulty with teacher retention. I recognize it, having worked for so many years in the field of behavioral health as it applies to children with developmental disabilities. Obviously, I recognize what a challenge it is in the preschool. However, my understanding is that partly with support from the county and with other supports, that behavioral health programs, support programs like Sunshine, have been increasingly active, seeing and serving many, many more children in the preschool programs across the county. And you know, I'm sure that help is really very valuable to the children and the families, and provides a kind of a relief for the teachers who are really struggling with management in the classroom. But there is a kind of a flip side to that. These issues that are very, very common, these behavioral issues, become mental health issues and behavioral health issues, as opposed to pedagogical issues, as opposed to, you know, classroom behavior issues. And I'm not sure that the efforts really lead to effective resolution of those problems. So, you know, money has been going in towards providing behavioral supports, and I think that's critical, it's needed, but I'm not sure how effective that is in relieving the challenges or addressing the challenges of behavior in the classroom.
I do think we actually saw, I on the site visits, we saw some programs engage with Sunshine, and I completely hear what you're saying. I think, but we did see this done very well at Verner, where they are paying for an IT specialist with part of the grant funding from Buncombe, and that specialist helps the teachers in the classroom, specifically, how do you set up the classroom with the pedagogical component that you're referring to.
Yes.
And so from that perspective, their application talks about behavioral health and supports, but they're paying for that specialist who has a master's degree to come in and help teachers work in their classroom to get at exactly what you're saying. So I hear it just might be a specific component of investment, but I thought that was working very well.
Yes. So where it's working well, obviously that needs support, that needs to continue. But I guess I'm just sort of suggesting that we think about, you know, where the most effective levers are. And it would seem to me that others on the board there, such as supplementing subsidy rates, where, you know, if you can do that, you address the affordability problem, you address the poor teacher pay problem, you address the sustainability for providers of running preschool programs, all of those important economic factors that are, I think, central to the current challenges. All of those are very significantly impacted when you boost the subsidy rates.
And I think that this is kind of a perfect touch point in our conversation of having more than one way to make an omelet, right? I think you can approach it directly with direct investment on certain aspects and put up specific guardrails around behavioral health and what that looks like from a pedagogy versus behavioral health greater context. Or you can free up money and let the folks do what they want with the other side of it. Either way, you're gonna get to the same place is our hope. But I think being very specific about what we want from people, if we do go the route of very specific funding for behavioral health, great, let's talk about what's actually going to work. And if we determine that what people want to do is not going to be in conformance with best practice or something that will move the needle, we can have that conversation and say, hard no, we're not funding those that don't meet that criteria, whatever that may be. But it sounds like we're just being specific about what we're asking for and what we need and what problem we're trying to solve. I see them as kind of a both and more than a selection.
I think I just want to look at, like, back to your point about, do we need anything from the particular current format of very bright, easy to read cities. Thank you for that. I think like seeing them in buckets would be really helpful. Like there seems to be like some really clear, there's slots, there's workforce, there's behavioral supports, because I don't think that there's a bad lever to pull. And like one thing, one like pushback I would have on that comment is just, they're all effective. Done well, all of these are going to have an important impact in our system. It's not a bad lever to pull from. One important question that we haven't really wrestled with is like, where are the gaps currently in funding sources? We heard from our panel that like the advocacy initiatives happening in Raleigh are not really getting traction around some of the slot pieces. We don't know what other support there is for mental health or for workforce development happening at the county or state level. And so I think answering that question feels most important, because I think which is better is just going to keep us in the loop, because they're all important, they're all critical, and they all have impact when done well. It's just a matter of like, what is our county, where is our county experiencing the biggest gap right now?
Yeah, and it depends on what impacted population we are thinking of. So if you're a family, you might be thinking of the hours that you can get care, or the location, or the cost. If you're a provider, one of the gaps that they've been communicating is flexible operating funding, as opposed to restricted funding. And so maybe that's something we can try and tease out in our engagement.
Yes.
In additional data.
A bit of a clarification. I mean like gaps in like systems gaps. So like where are funding initiatives happening, right? Like is there investment in the workforce development of youth in the community that could support some of what we're talking about? Is there investment from other funders in the area looking at mental health in children? So more of those gaps and less service gaps.
That makes a lot of sense.
One thing I like about the teacher pay supplements is that it would seem to be across the board. That was a lot of an issue with all of the providers, and it doesn't necessarily put us in like these two, like a pre-K or a middle class, like kind of hole that or like pigeon to go to one to the other, because I feel like that can feel a little tricky to navigate, like where funds go towards. From an educator standpoint, I like very much see with kiddos that like are a little bit more at risk and then have pre-K and go into kindergarten, makes a huge difference for like that exposure. Not to say that like middle income families don't as much have that, but just like I lean towards that's just so important to have that exposure. So that's kind of why I like the teacher pay, because I feel like it covers, they can hit like a lot of different providers.
It's also an interesting idea, sorry if I'm interrupting anyone, to think about supplementing teacher pay across centers, because each center is, has like Werner Center has, mental health supports and teaches circle of security classroom. And like there's mental health professionals present on site. So, every center has different gaps and different levels of being trauma informed. But when we think about like teacher pay, that feels like there's a gap across the system, right? So I kind of start thinking about, or like if we're talking behavioral support, Sunshine Project, of which we fund, available to all, that kind of thing.
Just to continue along that line, so supplementing teacher pay can take different forms, right? I mean, there are some projects in which county funds are actually paying people's salaries. And that's great. Those people get employed, but then the problem is that, the county funds dry up or some such change happens and that money's soft. That can't be relied on. So what my understanding of how subsidy rates work and how supplementing the subsidy rates might work is that increases the income for providers, increases the money incoming to programs, and would allow them then to raise teacher salaries that way. Is that seems more sustainable to me than directly paying salary or directly supplementing salary.
Because that money feels more sustainable.
Yeah.
I don't know that I don't know.
What has happened in the past where counties or local government have supplemented subsidy rates? Does that become fixed? Does that higher subsidy rate continue in some ways beyond the time during which the county is actually providing those supplements?
I have to dig in and look at some further examples, but it does occur to me that we would need to build in some kind of responsiveness to what happens at the state level. Because as we heard during the panel, there is a regular cycle of gathering information and recalibrating formulas and rates.
And they're currently under an order to redo their approach and how they do the subsidy rates. So states are supposed to be moving to a model that more accurately reflects those. So, I mean, who knows, but they are being told to do that.
Right, and so then there's like the true cost of care, which it is aiming at trying to cover. And the premise at this table is that providers don't have enough money like teacher pay should be higher, so true cost of care would still come up short, as long as any supplement, and it's true that the NC pre-K supplement does this, as long as it's responsive to what it's.
Well, and there's some other factors too, because your tuition rate is not really the true cost of care. The gap fee that parents are supposed to pay is different at every center, and centers handle that differently if a family is not able to afford that gap fee. So it's a very amorphous, the true cost of care is a very amorphous number that we've never been able to really put our thumb on, unfortunately. I don't think, at least in my work in the last 30 years, and redoing how we look at subsidy. We've, as you've heard me say a million times, we've been doing that for 20 years. So hopefully maybe it will come about. But that's a very hard number to figure. It would be very fascinating to come up with a formula perhaps that the centers could use to determine what their true cost of care is. And that would help us deal from a more a position of knowledge better.
Adrian, to your premise, one of the ways that the NC Pre-K supplement program ensures that some of that money is going to teachers is that they set a minimum teacher pay rate, which was above what many providers were
Yes.
paying, and so use this extra funding to get there.
And that's for like every center that's using
NC Pre-K, every teacher in an pre-K classroom.
So it's just for those teachers.
Right.
Yeah.
Every action has these, in this interconnected system, intended and unintended consequences. And so it created, I forget what Oka Partnership reported they were doing about it, but it did create a disparity in centers where the NC Pre-K, I'm like trying to make eye contact with providers in the back of the room, but where NC Pre-K teachers were getting different. Non-NC Pre-K teachers were getting because they've been.
There are groups out there that do cost models that take all the state level factors into consideration. You can build out estimate models that will factor in as many things.
Actually, some very good publicly available tools that are very easy.
Can we make a note to come back to that discussion, because I'm curious to kind of dive into that, if that's really gonna weigh in terms of what path we choose, and there is data that it seems like that would move the needle for a lot of people in this room to know what those numbers are before you make a decision.
And the process is designed so that we can choose more ideas than we end up going to get that more in-depth program design cost modeling completed before we choose.
Pat, I'm gonna put you on the spot because I saw your face. I didn't know if that was a sign that I need to say something else or.
No, I'm just thinking about the importance of those infant toddler teachers and their skills. And we have this wonderful NC Pre-K program. Where is our NC infant toddler program to boost those teachers to a higher level? You know, that it does. If you've got an NC Pre-K teacher down the hall, and I know I'm working just as hard, but I have 2-year-olds. Why are we getting, and we've both been teaching the same number of years, why does she get more than I do?
I deeply appreciate that point, having worked in a field where we constantly revalue people's money-making capacity. I think maybe that helps me frame it a little bit better in my mind, as rather than picking one specific thing, maybe like a ranked choice voting approach of like, I don't want this at the exclusion of this other thing. So whatever we choose can kind of work in tandem, right? Because I don't want to do something that's going to eliminate a really important thing to all of us, which would be the infant portion of that. And anything that would do harm there is not, if option A gets rid of option B, then I'm no longer interested in option A. So I'm kind of asking not to choose today because I think that's right. But figuring out what we need to figure out what would be mutually exclusive versus collaborative might be helpful. Are you running out of free time yet, Rachel?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's hard to
You're
see.
fine. Go ahead.
Before I forget to mention that, I'm sorry to curve to a different sort of topic, but I did want to go back to the sustainability component. Just at a quick glance at our scoring criteria, I know that it's mentioned and grant applicants have to describe their sustainability plan in their application, but I'm not seeing where we're matching that in the scoring rubric to make sure we're evaluating their response for sustainability. I could have very well missed it, but I did want to just mention how important I think that is for the review committee.
So that is related to the criteria for this next round, and you are 100% correct that that is not a scored question. And the discussion was, this is a system where there's a deficit of funding and the sustainability plan is to fundraise. And so it sort of didn't seem to hold as much value as the questions that were chosen to be scored.
It was previously a scoring category and the committee took it out a couple of years ago.
Okay, thank you for that memory. It's tricky.
It is tricky, yeah. And Rachel, you know, too, being on the side of writing grants, you know, on my side of the house for different things, you know, I can appreciate both sides of that. But I think when we kind of sit here and talk about whether it's the workforce component or capacity component or whatever sort of that tier that the applicant is focusing on, and we're talking about, well, how are they going to do this after this grant ends? To some degree, it's always the same answer. Like, we're going to fundraise, we're going to continue to seek grant sources. You know, they sort of have that boilerplate language that they use, but I would think if we're looking at, you know, in its simplest form, if you're looking at applicant A versus applicant B, and applicant A has demonstrated at least, you know, being verbatim about we're going to fundraise, we're going to look at federal sources, we're going to advocate with our legislature, at least if they've met that, versus applicant B doesn't address it, there's no real way to concretely say that one has, you know, emphasize sustainability over the other. But yeah, I totally agree. That's a difficult one. I just don't see how we can talk about it without it being in our scoring criteria later on. So
It will be important for the focused initiative. That is one thing that we hear criticism or frustration from providers that the grant is competitive every year. And so it's difficult to sustain year after year. If and when the committee shifts to a different focus, the intent is to stay the course on that for an extended period of time. We haven't had the timing conversation, but I don't think it's baked in that we're going to try to wean ourselves. We do need to get, I look at Al, and that's when we need to get more other investors coming in on the matching with funding and matching with other types of support. But the old nonprofit sort of funder thought of weaning, you know, nonprofit weaning itself off grants and becoming self-sufficient is a bit of a fallacy.
yeah, agreed, Rachel.
I guess I didn't quite beat out Emily on the off mute button, so I'm gonna actually jump back to what was being discussed right before, which is just around the which I appreciated, the salary for teachers or the hourly rate for a 2-year-old classroom versus the BK. And I also I want to note that in my brainstorming, I have awareness that excluding that infant toddler population in terms of social emotional development, in my opinion, is a huge mistake in terms of our focus and how important that age range, like the first 3 years of life, is in brain development and social emotional development. It's a foundation for global development. So in honoring the profession and all of the very important work that these teachers are doing, I just want to recognize the impact it has at a very early age, which later affects those BK classrooms. So just to make that point, as we're, you know, just as we're surfing through this whole discussion about inclusivity.
Thank you for that, Heather. Agreed. Rachel, since I don't want to put your notes on a public screen, it would be hard for us to do so. Any gaps that we're leaving you in terms of specific, I guess, not directives, but maybe questions that we're going to have for our counties? Some of these questions I think they'd be able to answer pretty easily because they've either explored it or actively executing on some of the things that we're discussing.
We haven't sat down to come up with a list of potential questions yet, but happy to accept ideas.
Yeah, I guess as we're brainstorming what our takeaways are from this conversation, I'm hearing a lot of questions that I'd love to ask them. I trust your notes to the extent that some of them I think you'd organically ask, but really just what does that execution look like for the many things? I know I heard subsidies coming up and what that looks like in practice. What's the distribution look like? Obviously, the counties in North Carolina, so we're all operating under the same laws. We don't have the interstate problem we normally would have. But what roadblocks or what tools might they have that we do not, so we can know what our actual options are here in Macomb County as opposed to this theoretical, if we change the ordinance to do this, then we'd be able to do what they're doing. I just want to know what we can actually do right now, and if we need to make changes to something greater, have a roadmap for what that looks like. So it's not snap your fingers and the county changes. We need to have a plan for how to best execute whatever vision will work best for us. So basically lobbying from within. So we know what to take to the Board of Commissioners and say, hey, let's vote on this to make this happen the way that we want to see it happen.
One other, and looking at our sticky notes, kind of a piece that I think we've talked about in the past, but not recently, is just the ability of parents to work because they have childcare and to support our workforce as the county workforce. Parents as employees, not in the early childhood, but in all the other corporations around the community. Because I think that was one of the other goals of this committee, is to support our parents that are workers.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that's a really great specific question because we've danced around and even had the chambers a member of this committee before, and I think there's a willingness to play a role and share data, and I'm confident that there's any number of people in our business community that would weigh in on a lot of this, but
Turning that into an idea,
Yeah.
would it match for me to say supporting full-time year-round care? I know with the pre-K program, it ends at 2 p.m. Is often
Just supporting our workforce with childcare. Not hit the, we were talking before, like who needs what hours. Shift workers that work in the evening, there's no childcare center for them.
Yeah, I'm alone, unfortunately.
Or they're staying with
Somebody that
watching a 3-year-old
or the wrong adult is there.
Rachel, some time ago, I read something that maybe you had sent around about the Tri-Share program, and I wondered if any of the representatives who are coming from these counties had implemented a Tri-Share program or something similar.
I don't have that to the list.
well, I'm not going to cut us off, but I feel really positive about this conversation. I think we have a good set of guardrails for how we make the best use of the time of our next meeting as well in terms of what we ask. And if we can, let's go ahead and build in a healthy amount of time for, I guess I'm looking at Rachel, I should look at Angela. Time to ask questions for follow-up, because a lot of this execution is going to seem very specific, and I would hate to limit ourselves to just pre-existing questions. So if they don't mind being put in the spot, it's like, hey, how did you actually implement that given your program landscape looks more like welcome then?
Yep, we'll try to reflect for both. It's set for a 90-minute conversation if you think that is enough. We'll work within that. It's an option to extend if you're concerned about time.
I would not dream of trying to think that going beyond 90 minutes is a good idea given our briefing timing, but
Quickly going back, Adrian, would you like Tri-Share to be listed, a Tri-Share type model to be listed on the possible ideas? That's where the family, the employer, and some kind of public source each put in a third or a portion of the.
I mean, unless those who've been grappling with this for a long time would say that there's just no opportunity to develop such a program locally. I don't know.
I think we need more information, and we can get that.
Mhm.
I think we need more information, but I'll just put it on the.
And I will say, if you weren't gonna say yes, I was, because we keep talking in theory, I think it's been at least 2 years now of how we engage our business community. And we just haven't had anything tangible. Literally, that's when we come up to me and say, if we wanted to give you 500,000, what would you do with it?
Yeah.
Let's at least ask the question.
I mean, it just seems fundamentally the whole childcare system is just resting on an unsustainable foundation. The economics just don't work, and you need to get more funds in somehow in an ongoing way to support early child education.
That's
I
just someone
wanted
who
to
just
just add that I want to echo Heather's comment earlier about the birth to 3 infants and toddlers and the importance of early brain development during those first 1,000 days. And my recollection of reviewing some of the data locally as to how things have changed in recent years was that there really has been a decline in family childcare homes. And for the very young child, that can be a very suitable way of having kids receive some of the early nurturing care out of home while their parents work. And I think that some of the practical difficulties of establishing a child care home and licensing it as such, it just makes it's so daunting for families to do, for potential carers to do. And if there is a way to, provide technical assistance and support to families to allow them to just sort of step up and say, yeah, I can take 5 kids at home, I can do that. That could be a very helpful project.
Or possibly advocating for smaller
Yeah.
home care.
I believe there was a project at the state level recently in North Carolina, and Rachel, you circulated the Erickson report on implementing NC pre-K and family childcare homes as well. And so there's some recent work around that, even at the pre-K level. I'm entirely in agreement. As part of the mixed delivery system, FCC has in place, and a lot of parents want it for younger children.
Yes.
So I have a question. My children go to Christina Avery, so I'm there a lot, and I've been engaged with Burner. As you were touring, one thing that I'm hearing is that there's not many infant classrooms. Did you see a lot of open, because I've heard conversations where there was open seats in classrooms, but I also know as a mother of a 1-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 4-year-old, that infant classrooms in Buncombe County is a struggle.
Absolutely, 100%. It was very rare that we saw one, and I think I went to all but 3. And it's that I was blown away. I don't see how people are doing.
Can we add that, infant classrooms? And I think unfunded mandates, I think that drives people away from doing the home daycares, because whenever you're a small business owner, right? Great liability and no advocacy.
And the ratios are so much smaller, taking on a lot of legal. And that's why a lot of companies don't want to add insurance, because the ratios, they're not going to be profitable, and that's what they're thinking of. Unfortunately, is they're thinking of the money and not.
So can we do something to encourage people to open the home daycare centers for infants? And that would even also be helping our small business owners here.
Yes.
I think we kind of discussed last time, but let's make it concrete. The idea of a set of policy recommendations to go along with whatever we do here, kind of the same way we do our lobbying agenda. Aspirationally, is the state gonna change? Some things probably not, but asking for it seems more open than pretending it doesn't exist as a real problem. Actually, now that I think about that, it's a really good point. How do y'all feel about us, and I'm mostly targeting this to my two colleagues on commission, just rolling that into whatever our lobbying ask is for early childhood? Make it more concrete, whatever we come up with here, we'll just tack on to the lobbying kind of already built-in mechanism.
You mean for toddlers,
For infants, yeah.
for infants, yeah.
Can you repeat the question? It was a bit garbled. I'm sorry.
Me too.
I will say just briefly that Buncombe County government has a legislative agenda. We have a lobbying firm that's paid by the county, and the commissioners go through a process of selecting what they would like to have on the legislative agenda each year. And in order to feed up to that, to get ideas for consideration, boards and commissions and county departments can suggest potential ideas. And we have been doing that in an informal way, had the subsidy rate slot went on there, had the, I think this is correct, the extending the stabilization grants on there. Does that sound familiar? And so if this committee moved into more of like a formal policy recommendations stance, then we would be, it would be even more clear to carry forward to the.
I will aggressively suggest that we do that.
So wait, let me understand. What you're saying is making a recommendation that Buncombe commissioners fund continuation of the stabilization grant?
No,
Just
go ahead. You can.
Not necessarily saying that, but really just coming together and offering from this committee a, I won't say comprehensive, but some clear, finite, movable policy asks to go through commission, through our lobbyists to Raleigh. I'm not saying specifically what those are, but just formalizing what we already kind of do now, putting it in writing. This is what your early childhood folks have dug into. We spent way more time on this than we ever will on commission. Can you roll this into your otherwise better robust recommendations for lobbying in Raleigh?
I think, it might be helpful, putting what a lobbyist, but they're there.
Yes, so this is great because lawyers are only good at two things, money and this. So our lobbyist is effectively there to help advocate for the interests of their client. In this case, the client would be Buncombe County. I think it's a strategic move on the county's part. This is before my time on there that we decided to bring on the law firm Gordon Smith, who is tied into the insiders in Raleigh. We understand that we're going to have some specific challenges, specific wording is going to trigger certain things in different political circles, but there are some areas of touch points where we can move the needle because there are shared goals about what we want to see happen for our kids. And to that end, I think the lobbying firm does a really good job of contacting the legislators, both in the House and state Senate, to reach out and figure out how do we bridge that divide between parties and ask for and get what we need in an effective way. Sometimes the messenger is more important than the message itself, so this is our way of bridging that. Was that a nice enough way of saying something really controversial?
Yeah, great job.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. That's a great point.
So I think that might be a good question for panelists when it's time. They have similar legislative priorities that they work on around this. There's
And you may be saying this more clearly, but I love the idea of, to the extent that we have neighbors asking as a Western region, like, hey, this is, as goes Buncombe, as goes all of Western North Carolina, maybe we can get some buy-in from people saying, this is a Western North Carolina problem. We don't limit childcare to just people who live in Buncombe County sometimes. Our deputies who live in Haywood County are commuting over all the stuff that we know. But I do think if getting two more counties on board saying, hey, we're in Haywood and we still want Buncombe to get this because it impacts us so greatly, we're happy to roll with that.
And the guest that was on the panel, Greg Borum, he represents an early childhood coalition, that's Western Regional.
they used a very nice framing term of infrastructure when they were making the case that this really could be considered as infrastructure. That might be a good way of framing just things.
So I guess we can try to add more to your plate, Rachel, and just put all this together and figure out what's actionable enough or clear enough that we can put in writing. If we miss anything by next meeting, we can certainly talk about that, but hopefully this is a good start, Jordan.
Yep, some good questions for the panel. We've got some good ideas. I wasn't sure again walking in today if we were gonna get to the putting ideas on a list, so now we have a starting list. And we will bucketize that starting list. And it has occurred to me while sitting here that another guest for our panel for January 5th or 6th would be one of the counties that was participating in the TriShare pilot. I'll ask around and figure out who that's great. You have a sense, Carol?
I thought Cleveland County was on the list.
That one stands out to me.
Yeah.
Yes, Tony.
I'm sorry, I don't know my counties very well.
I think it is, yeah, no data.
That Piedmont.
Rachel, is this what was referred to as engagement opportunity on the revised plan?
No, we're not there yet.
Oh, what is it?
We took the agenda, if you would pop it up, and went to the last item first. May I have the opportunity to ask about engagement?
Please.
We switched at a committee member recommendation, instead of saying like provider survey, community survey, we put engagement opportunity, something more general, with the thought that we'll design it together and we would like a subgroup to help us do that. And so if a small handful of committee members would like to volunteer, we would like to follow up with you and have a specific subgroup meeting. I'm trying not to look at anyone, about engagement. And we are accepting volunteers at this time.
How many would you prefer?
3 to 5? I think 2 or 6.
volunteer to contribute. I volunteer to contribute.
I hesitate to ask this out loud, but any idea for how often or long that group would meet?
Two meetings up at the front end, and then maybe some work by email, looking at survey questions. Maybe another meeting later to look at what has come in.
I can, yeah.
We have 4 so far. We have Martin, Adrian, Sarah Kay, and Maya.
I think aspirationally, if we do it right, we hit what we need to engage people. Like, it's not intended to be a long-standing group existing just for the sake of existing, and I'll be the first to admit I don't like being in meetings for no reason, so it'll be quick.
Great, thank you.
I'll volunteer.
Thank you. 5 members.
Can we think on it and get back to you in 24 hours?
Yes.
More the merrier.
Other question mark. Okay.
All right, Rachel, is there anything that I missed that you wanted to go into? I know I kind of breezed this through.
Yes, the first item of business.
Yes.
It was the FY 27 grant guidelines that were provided in your packet. Those who are new to the committee are seeing this for the first time. Those who have served before, this should look very familiar. The document called grant guidelines is kind of a long document. It looks a little bit like a notice of funding if you've been out in the funding world. It's dense. do keep in mind that we communicate this information in a lot of different ways, not just through this long document. But it is a 6-page document that describes the funding source, the funding process from beginning to end. And so this is for the funding that would open in January. Applications would be submitted to the committee for review in February and would be independent, and then group work to provide recommendations by April, and then that starts in July. The amount that we have penciled in as an anticipated budget is just north of $4 million, $4,054,185. Did we get there through the allocation? Is that the allocation only?
Allocation rollover.
I think it does include a little bit of rollover.
So
And I think that's why we did that up to you, because
we will confirm the number, so that the county this committee still has flexibility to recommend using funding toward the scoping of the possible focused investments in addition to grants. This keeps the same priorities, to include infant, toddler, preschool, and pre-K, with emphasis on pre-K, which was some inherited sort of historical language. There's eligibility criteria that specify that any type of organization can apply, that it has to meet a public purpose, come in through this application process, and then on the top of the next page, those strategies that we've seen and talked about that are quite comprehensive, projects to develop the workforce, maintain or enhance existing slots, or increase slots, increase quality, support families, or enhance the effectiveness of the overall system. There's a schedule that I just briefly described, details about the application process. And then on page 3, the application questions are listed here. 95% the same, probably, as last year. Thank you, Emily, for reading this list of questions with thoughtfulness to the review criteria, which are detailed in this section related to review process. We also give the scoring tool itself in its entirety out as part of these when we publish them. The scoring criteria were in your packet as a separate document. We will talk more when it gets closer to time about how to apply this criteria, but it is on a scale of 1 point to 5 points across 5 criteria, with descriptions of sort of anchors for what would make a great 3-point answer, for example. Our recommendation is not to toy with this too much, knowing that it's not likely to be repeated in its same form after FY27 because of the shift to focus investment. However, we certainly can make any adjustments if members of the committee have seen anything that they would like to request to be modified.
This is a free space to offer insight here.
It is.
And we'll also put an asterisk next to it. For those of you who have been on the committee for more than a year, this is an extremely cumbersome process in execution. So please know that if you do tweak it, please know how hard it is before you tweak It is not easy when you're reading through all the applications to make sure you do it correctly, and as the Commissioner White said,
Well put, I was saying.
it's enjoyable, you learn a lot about the programs, I think that paired with site visits is the best way to really dive in and understand. But it is not something you can sit down in the evening and knock out in an hour, so. Make sure you dig in, understand, and if you think of ways to streamline it, I'm sure Rachel will be happy, but let's not add too much to what is already a complicated puzzle.
It is imperfect, as all application processes and scoring criteria will be. And it's been evolved over the course of the last 6 or however many years. And we feel like it does a pretty good job.
Do you have any action items that we need today, or is this just for edification?
Would you like a vote? Did we voted on it before? Lawyer,
Wait, what are we voting on?
should the committee vote to accept these grant guidelines?
Yes.
Okay.
If it's gonna be something that's gonna be applied outside of this.
Can we, does anybody need more time to look at it? I know it's kind of throwing a lot at you all at once if you haven't looked at it.
I'd like to just raise again, I know I discussed this before with you, Rachel, and Martin, about the strategies that we're putting forward to grant applicants. Considering those bullet points, I think that Angela, yeah, you could just flip up there. Considering those bullet points and how they match the pink pages that you put on the list there, whether there is anything on there on the existing bullet points that perhaps no longer really is a priority, or as we are thinking about fiscal year 2008 and transitioning towards a somewhat different system, whether we want to guide potential applicants towards projects that may be more in keeping with the priorities that the committee will likely be landing on 6 months from now. I mean, for example, that bullet point, maintain or enhance existing slots. I mean, we've had so much discussion about slots and how to sort of interpret that. I'm not sure I even know what that even means.
It's written with lots of flexibility in there.
Yeah.
It could be teacher pay, right? I mean,
Yeah.
teacher pay supports retention, supports, maybe that's quality, but maintain slots. And so Rachel, you're saying it's by design so that we can accept a lot of different approaches.
I would say yes.
You know, as I read it the other night, thinking of where we've come from since we started, and I think we're at a good point. But to answer your question, I really think when you look at it, we've got the flexibility, they have put it in there to take us where we need to go. I think we'll be fine with it. I want to commend you for that. I think you've done a good job, because as I read it, I couldn't help but think of some of what we've gone through to get to this point.
Yeah.
But I feel we're getting.
Support families is another
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
And another thing, I've been quiet today, but what impressed me most, we're finally having the conversations that I've wanted to hear for 4 or 5 years now, since we've been doing the committee. We're getting where we need to be and getting the input from those of you who've lived it or you're doing it today. And I think that's what's critical for us as commissioners, to make sure that we're getting the biggest bang for our buck. We gotta hear from you. Because after my grandkids, and they've grown now, so I'm I'm paying attention now, but we need to hear from where the rubber meets the road, and I think that's good, because in dealing with taxpayers' money, it's critical. And we're being pulled for so many directions. And Martin and I've had this discussion. We were concerned after Helene that we would keep this fund, because we were, but everybody realized the importance of what we're doing for our kids. So we gotta keep it going. But it's really critical, and I think one of the things we can't forget though, is when we look at the infants and what's going on there, because what I see there is where we're really losing our underprivileged kids. And it's causing, when you look at it, the gaps we have in public education and all, that's a big problem. And, I've seen it personally, with one of my grandsons, of what happened when, thank goodness, his grandmom retired from teaching. But when I saw him, you might have heard this story before, go to kindergarten. And I happened to be the one to pick him up after the first day. The kid was he was so confused. He was frustrated because he couldn't understand how kids didn't answer to their name. They didn't know the alphabet. They couldn't count. They didn't know their phone number, their addresses and all that. But he knew it. And he had even been on the computer because grandma had gotten the computer programs wrong. But we've got to get to those kids at that level. I mean, if we're going to really be successful with what we do, we got to get it. Yeah. And we got to do more too with workforce. I tell you what's been just frustrating for me is dealing with a lot of companies. And we got a few that's good, stay coming forward, but a lot of them, they push you 100% until you put your hand out and said, okay, what are you giving? That's when we see the back off them. But I still think we've got to do, that's something that on the commission level, through EDC at the chamber and other levels, we've got to really push to get some examples from some of these big companies to step up and help us.
So to your question, Adrian, are you recommending that we can shift?
No, I totally see your point with regard to flexibility. And I can't see that any minor tweaking is gonna make, significant enough difference to be worth trying to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Al.
Do you think P, is that true? One, the first sentence was functionalized, I'm sure there's a cap to the fund itself, but the second part, multi-year requests, are we still gonna consider
good
those?
point.
If
You put it in.
That's a good
I don't think that it's
Just add not.
feasible to do so.
So will we explicitly say this will only be for 1 year?
And the currently funded organizations are aware of this process. That the committee's going through.
are there any severe?
There are no multi-year commitments at this. It has been a tool available to us that hasn't been used very time. We used it once to get a capital project for a school-based program funded over a course of 2 years, and then a couple of other instances.
Well, hating to fill of silence, I think absent cutting the multi-year request portion, if there are no other changes with that small amendment, I'll move that we adopt this for this upcoming fiscal year with the understanding that we'll do everything we discussed for the previous. Second. Thank you. Any discussion? If not, all in favor? Any opposed? I'll assume I, small people online. Heather, I can only see you, so thank you. Stacy, Emily, feel free to object if you like, but will not encourage it unless you want to. Do we have any public comment, just so I know how to best go on? You know? And any announcements from staff?
The January meeting will be virtual so that we can host out-of-town guests conveniently. So that will be held via Zoom. Your calendar invitation will be updated accordingly. And you'll notice that, I guess, with the clerk.
Perfect. That means everyone feel free to bring lunch. Our next meeting will be January 6th. That's really a great date.
Just the one meeting.
Just the one. That's great, Dave.
Unless you raise your hand.
Absolutely.
You can have a second. Call special meetings all day. All right, well, unless anyone has anything pressing, thank you all for brainstorming and for bringing your A game every time. I'm so grateful to have an engaged committee and to what Commissioner Whiteside says. This is a conversation we needed to have for a while. I think we danced around a lot of topics to the points, and we're finally in a space of being nimble enough to address where we stand today, post the lean, post a lot of challenges, but also structured enough that our programs can see how we're thinking, how we're moving, and continue to share that transparency with people who are going to be most impacted by it. Please feel free to email us. We'll weigh in your feedback, but otherwise, y'all have a great afternoon and look forward to seeing you in the new year.
Thanks.